project started about 2.5 years ago when I wanted to extend what was already here, which is this. And I thought, because the bombed out church has got a very unique history and the Bluecoat's got a unique history, I thought it'd be a good idea to combine the two. The project here has three different facets. One is an exhibition which is on here now. Two is a installation at the bombed out church, and three is a series of artworks that connect them in the street, and they tell the history of powered flight from 1903 to 2021. I'm interested specifically in the combination of hope for the future and catastrophe, which is embodied in man's age-old dream of achieving powered flight. What I've done is to try to show the difference between what we've achieved and from what position we observe it. In other words, people looking up and cheering and waving to the plane as it goes by, but they are rooted to the ground. Later in the same sequence, the same people rooted to the ground witness the First World War and of course the nuclear bomb. I was interested in ways in which that narrative could come out of that very simple beginning which embodied hope within it.
Can we talk about the technique? Because it is fascinating, and you're exemplary in the way that you exploit the possibilities of the action plate. Can you say a bit about how that works for those of you that don't understand the techniques?
I start with a copper plate, I do my image on it. When I've got the image I want, which is the first episode in the story I'm trying to tell, I print it. Then I go back to the plate, I consider all the things I want to say, and then I graft those onto the plate. So this is like time itself, including ourselves and our bodies, etc. So basically the skeleton of the past is still there, and if you look, you can still see what happened in the 10 years before, but on top of it, there's a new image. And you can see in that new image what was there in the past slightly, but what's taken over is the new reality. So the other image is perhaps buried in it, or exists like a scar or like a ghost even. Sometimes involves some actual physical scraping out on the plate. You can discern when you see the print the abrupt violence that the new life is imposed on the old. It often can represent a striking out. When you enter Gold Street, you see the bombed out church at the end of it. That's where everything's aspiring to. And it's leading you from that first image at the Bluecoat up to the church, which was bombed in 1941. So it's a kind of a pilgrimage to a space which was kind of sacred because it was bombed, and it's been maintained as a monument to the people who died in the 1941 Blitz. Coming into town and going back out of town, you'd pass the bombed out church. Nothing used to happen there in those days. I think the gardens might have been open, but there was no activities whatsoever. The whole Mersey scene was a great place for a young boy or girl to have aspirations about being creative. Of course, the 60s was dominated by the kind of the pop revolution and the Beatles and everything like that. And we actually thought we were the centre of the world in those days, because in many ways we were, you know. These are the frescoes I've done so far, and they've taken, up to this point, taken 3 weeks to get to this point. And they're all painted in wet plaster. So you do as much as you can do in a day. So you divide your picture up into the little areas that you can do in a day, and like a jigsaw puzzle of wet plaster. So you put, basically you draw the background on first, roughly, so you've got an idea of it all mapped out. So what I did on the first day was these three images here, 1, 2, 3, and got them done as much as I could do, and then the plaster's dry, you can paint on it, but it's no longer fresco paint. It becomes like a thin film of paint. But the main thing is working with that sense of the thing which is drying out. But it's very organic. You're working with something which is, it's like you and the plaster are working together. That's the biggest attraction. Initially, I was in a project mind. After the second week, I was in a more of a life work mind. There's suddenly a connection between me and all the hundreds of artists in the past who've done paintings in this manner, in which they've just dedicated themselves to doing it. I now realise the full force of being able to do a public work for the public. There's so many issues here, but because they're done in this religious way, they are presented as not my story, but everyone's story. It's a humanist story, and the context of the chapel forces them to think beyond just an artist and his work, but back to what churches are about, what great works of architecture are about, all human endeavour really. So it's about endeavour.